There comes a point in life when you realize that the gap between where you are and where you want to be is not defined by luck, talent, or even opportunity. It is defined by your standards. What you are willing to accept becomes the ceiling of your life. If you tolerate mediocrity, you will live a mediocre life. If you demand excellence from yourself, you will rise, even if the odds are stacked against you. The quality of your life is always a reflection of the standards you set, not the goals you write down. Goals inspire you, but standards shape you. So let us dive deep into the timeless truth of raising your standards. Most people do not fail because the path is unclear. They do not fail because they lack talent or because opportunities never reach their door. They fail because they allow excuses to creep into the cracks of their discipline, weakening the very standards that should carry them forward. Excuses are subtle, persuasive, and deceptively comforting. They whisper to you when the alarm rings at dawn, telling you that sleep is more important than progress. They convince you that one skipped workout will not matter, that one day of procrastination is harmless, that one broken promise to yourself is too small to count. But each time you give in, each time you allow that whisper to become your truth, you lower your standard. And lowering your standard even once makes it easier to lower it again tomorrow. The truth is that excuses are not just words, they are decisions. Every excuse accepted is a contract signed, a silent agreement to remain the same. And while the world rarely sees these moments, your life is quietly shaped by them. The habit of listening to excuses becomes the habit of surrendering your future. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine an athlete preparing for the Olympics. Her training is at 5 in the morning. And the rain is pouring down. Her body aches from yesterday's session. Her mind begs for rest. And every reason to stay in bed presents itself with perfect logic. But she rises anyway. She ties her shoes, steps into the cold, and pushes through the pain. She does not argue with her excuses. She does not negotiate with them. She simply refuses to give them power. That is the difference between ordinary people and champions. Champions do not allow comfort to write the rules of their life. Their standard is not conditional, it is absolute. You do not need to be an Olympic athlete to live by this principle. Every single day presents you with the same choice, excuses or standards. Will you let comfort rule you, or will you let commitment define you? The answer determines not only your productivity, but the kind of person you are becoming. Because when you repeatedly silence excuses, you are not just completing tasks, you are training your character. You are proving to yourself that your word is stronger than your feelings. Excuses, if you listen closely, always sound reasonable in the moment. They speak in the language of self-care, of logic, of practicality. You deserve more rest. You've had a long day. Tomorrow will be better. One time won't hurt. But later, when the moment has passed, the regret is louder than the excuse ever was. And that regret is the proof that you settled for less than you were capable of. If you want to raise your standards, you must stop negotiating with comfort. Do not give your excuses a seat at the table. Do not let them explain themselves, because they will always sound convincing. Instead, recognize them for what they are, barriers between who you are now and who you could be. Each time you defeat an excuse, you close the gap between your potential and your reality. So ask yourself with honesty, where in my life am I letting excuses win over my commitment? Maybe it is in your health, where you tell yourself you will start tomorrow. Maybe it is in your work, where you convince yourself that distractions are harmless. Maybe it is in your relationships, where you avoid the hard conversations because comfort feels easier than truth. Wherever it is, that is the very place your standards are being tested, and the decision is always yours. Excuses or standards? Comfort or growth? The person you are today, or the person you are capable of becoming? Your life will not be defined by what you said you wanted, but by what you refused to excuse. Imagine walking into a room full of people who constantly complain about life, who gossip about others, who justify their failures, and who spend their days repeating the same routines without a spark of ambition. At first, you may notice their habits, perhaps even feel that you are different, that you are stronger. But slowly, without realizing it, their energy begins to shape yours. You laugh at the same empty jokes, you accept the same excuses, you settle into the same patterns. This is the silent power of your environment. It does not shout, it whispers. And those whispers, repeated every day, eventually write the script of your life. You see, human beings are not isolated creatures. We absorb, we mimic, we adjust. Just as a plant bends toward the sunlight, we bend toward the standards around us. When you surround yourself with people who expect little from life, you will unconsciously lower your own expectations. But when you walk with those who hunger for growth, who push their limits, who carry themselves with discipline and vision, you will be forced to stretch beyond your comfort. That is why the people in your circle are not just companions. They are architects of your destiny. Think about a child who grows up in a family of musicians. Even before learning to play an instrument, the child absorbs rhythm, tone, discipline, and appreciation for sound. Music becomes a part of their soul, not because they sought it, but because it surrounded them. Excellence is not taught, it is caught. The same principle applies to you. Excellence, laziness, mediocrity, all of it is contagious. The question is, what are you catching from the people around you? Look closely at your life. Who are the 5 people you spend the most time with? Are they builders or destroyers? Do they challenge you to think bigger, to move with more discipline, to rise beyond your excuses? Or do they comfort you in mediocrity, telling you it's fine to stay where you are? If you are honest, you will see a reflection of yourself in them. Because your standards are not born in isolation. They are the echo of the company you keep. There are countless stories of people whose lives changed simply because they stepped into a new circle. A young entrepreneur struggling with doubt finds himself in a community of ambitious thinkers, and suddenly his confidence grows. A student with no interest in learning is placed in a classroom of passionate dreamers, and she discovers her hidden potential. The change does not come from books alone or from a sudden burst of willpower. It comes from the pull of the environment. Just as iron sharpens iron, people sharpen people. But here lies the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes raising your standards means leaving behind people you care about. It does not mean abandoning them with anger or judgment, but recognizing that your path requires a different atmosphere. It may mean spending less time with those who drain your energy and more time with those who inspire it. It may mean seeking mentors, joining communities, or intentionally placing yourself in spaces that demand more from you than you would demand from yourself. Growth requires courage, and often the first step is the courage to let go of circles that no longer serve the person you are becoming. This is not easy. Loneliness may visit you in the gap between your old circle and your new one. But remember, emptiness is better than chains. If you leave room in your life, life will eventually fill it with people who match your higher standards. And when you find yourself surrounded by people who think bigger, act stronger, and live with higher discipline, you will feel a shift in your own identity. You will no longer be satisfied with what once felt comfortable. You will want more, not because of greed, but because you have seen more, you have felt more, and you now know what is possible. So pause and reflect. Look around at the people in your life, at the voices you listen to, at the energy you allow into your space. Ask yourself, are they lifting me or lowering me? Are they planting seeds of growth or seeds of limitation? The answer to that question will show you why you are where you are, and it will also show you where you can go. Because in the end, your standards are not only shaped by your choices, but by the company you keep. Choose wisely, and you will find yourself rising, almost without effort, into the person you were always meant to become. There is a moment in every life when you realize that the real chains holding you back are not always the big obstacles, but the little things you have quietly tolerated for far too long. They creep into your life disguised as habits, disguised as relationships, disguised as comforts that slowly become cages. And the truth is, until you decide what you will no longer tolerate, you cannot rise to meet what you truly deserve. Raising your standards is not simply about dreaming of better things or setting ambitious goals. It is about taking a sharp and honest look at what you allow in your daily life and saying with conviction, "This ends here." Every standard begins with a boundary, and those boundaries are drawn the moment you refuse to let certain habits, behaviors, or environments have power over you. Think about someone who has been struggling financially for years. They work hard, yet they are always drowning in debt, always anxious about bills, always waiting for the next paycheck. One day, something inside of them shifts. They say to themselves, "I will no longer live like this. I will no longer spend money I don't have. I will no longer avoid learning about how money works. I will no longer tolerate this endless cycle." That single decision, spoken from the depths of frustration and courage, becomes a turning point. It doesn't magically erase their debt overnight, but it changes the way they act, the choices they make, the people they listen to. From that moment forward, they are no longer willing to live under the same standard. And that decision sets into motion a chain of change. The same principle applies to every area of life. Maybe you've tolerated unhealthy food that steals your energy, telling yourself you'll start eating better tomorrow. Maybe you've tolerated procrastination, watching days and weeks slip through your fingers, knowing deep inside that you are capable of so much more. Maybe you've tolerated endless scrolling on your phone, sacrificing your dreams for fleeting distractions. Or maybe you've tolerated relationships that drain you, people who take more than they give, people who dull your spirit instead of sharpening it. When you decide that these things are no longer acceptable, you take back your power. It's like clearing out a room filled with clutter. At first, it feels uncomfortable to throw things away, because they've been part of your life for so long. But as the space begins to open, you realize how much freedom you've been missing. The same happens in your inner life. When you cut off the weight of what no longer serves you, you create space for growth, for clarity, for a higher standard. History and stories of great lives are filled with these moments of decision. People do not transform because of vague wishes. They transform because one day they say, "Enough. Enough wasting time, enough tolerating disrespect, enough hiding from responsibility, enough playing small when I was meant to live larger." That moment of defiance against mediocrity is the seed from which new strength grows. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. Saying no more means breaking habits that once felt safe, walking away from people who once felt familiar, stepping into uncertainty where the old comforts no longer exist. But what you gain is worth the pain of release. You gain self-respect, you gain control, you gain the foundation upon which true progress is built. So pause and reflect on your own life. What are the silent thieves that have been draining you? The habits that weaken your health, the relationships that break your spirit, the distractions that waste your time. Write them down, say them out loud, and then declare, "This ends now." Because raising your standards does not begin with reaching higher. It begins with refusing to sink any lower. Once you decide what you will no longer tolerate, you ignite a fire inside of you. That fire becomes your compass, your discipline, your strength. It may not solve everything in an instant, but it will carry you forward. And from that moment on, life will no longer push you around. You will push back, you will draw the line, and you will rise. When people think about transformation, they often imagine a dramatic breakthrough, a moment where everything suddenly changes, where overnight success rewrites the story of their life. But real change is not a dramatic explosion. It is a quiet consistency. Big standards are never built in a single night. They are built, brick by brick, on the back of small, unbreakable habits. Habits that seem insignificant to the world, but silently shape the foundation of who you become. The mind loves to dream big, but hates to start small. You might say to yourself, I want to be healthier, wealthier, wiser, and the ambition feels good for a while. But then you are overwhelmed by the distance between where you are and where you want to be. That gap discourages most people. But here lies the truth. You don't need to close that gap in one giant leap. You only need one solid habit to set the tone, one non-negotiable standard that you refuse to break, no matter the circumstances. Consider the simple act of waking up at the same time every morning. On the surface, it doesn't look extraordinary, but what it builds inside you is discipline, and discipline is the root of every achievement. Or think of the commitment to read 10 pages of a book each day. In the beginning, it feels like nothing. 10 pages cannot possibly transform a life, can it? But do the math. In 1 year, that's over 3,000 pages, the equivalent of 10 to 15 books. Imagine how different your perspective, your knowledge, your wisdom would be if you carried that with you year after year. That is the compounding power of small habits. Or look at the choice to move your body for just 20 minutes a day. It doesn't sound like much, but 20 minutes daily adds up to over 120 hours of movement in a year, 120 hours of stronger muscles, clearer mind, and better health. And when you compare that to the countless hours wasted on scrolling, distractions, or empty entertainment, you realize just how powerful those minutes can become when they are invested instead of lost. Research into human behavior consistently shows us that consistent small improvements lead to exponential growth. This is the principle of getting 1% better every day. At first, 1% feels invisible, almost laughable. But compound it over a year, and you are 37 times better than where you started. That is the difference between staying average and stepping into mastery. Not giant leaps, but small steps repeated without fail. The beauty of small habits is that they do not demand perfection, they demand persistence. You will not always feel motivated, you will not always feel strong, but if the habit is non-negotiable, it will carry you even on the days when your willpower is weak. Think about brushing your teeth. You do it without debate, without resistance. It's simply part of who you are. Imagine if your habits of discipline, learning, and growth became as natural and automatic as brushing your teeth. That is when standards rise beyond effort and become identity. And this is where most people fail. They set habits that are too grand, too heavy, and when they break them once, they abandon them altogether. The key is to start small, but to hold that small habit with unbreakable commitment. Better to do 10 push-ups every day for a year than to do 100 push-ups for 3 days and then quit. Better to write 1 page a day for a year than to write 20 in a week and stop. Greatness belongs to those who master the art of staying, not just starting. So ask yourself, what one habit could you build today that would shift the direction of your life if you refuse to break it? It doesn't have to impress anyone. It doesn't have to look heroic. It only has to be consistent. Because once you keep one promise to yourself, you prove to your mind that you can be trusted. And when you trust yourself, bigger promises become possible. That is how standards rise. Not through a miracle, but through the quiet power of habits that refuse to bend. So often, people set goals that sound extraordinary, goals that sparkle with ambition, goals that make others pause in admiration. They say, I want to build a successful business, I want to write a book, I want to live in a better home, I want to transform my health. And yet, for many, those goals never become reality. Not because the path is impossible, not because they lack intelligence or resources, but because deep within they carry a silent belief that whispers, "I don't deserve this." And when that belief exists, no matter how high the goal is set, life quietly pulls them back down to the level of their self-worth. Your goals will never rise higher than the value you place upon yourself. You cannot expect the world to give you respect, opportunity, and abundance if you do not first believe you are worthy of it. Self-worth is the soil from which every achievement grows. If the soil is weak, the seed cannot take root. But when the soil is rich, when it is nurtured, when it is strong, then even the smallest seed of a goal can grow into something extraordinary. Think of a person trapped in an unhealthy relationship. They endure neglect, disrespect, perhaps even abuse, because deep down they have convinced themselves that this is all they deserve. They explain away the pain, telling themselves it could be worse, or that they are lucky to have even this. But one day, something shifts. It may be a quiet moment of reflection or a sudden breaking point, but they whisper to themselves words they have never dared to say before. "I deserve better than this." And with that single realization, the world around them changes. They walk away. They begin to heal. They start to expect respect instead of tolerating neglect. And slowly, their life begins to mirror the new value they place upon themselves. Raising your standards is not about arrogance. It is not about walking around thinking you are above everyone else. It is about an inner knowing, an unshakable truth that you are worthy of love, of success, of peace, of abundance, of opportunity. When you believe this, you no longer settle for crumbs when you are capable of the feast. You no longer chase people who mistreat you because you understand that your time, your energy, your heart is valuable. You no longer shrink your dreams to fit the limits others place upon you. Look at the world around you. People often rise not because they are the most talented, but because they believe they belong in the room. They walk into opportunities with the quiet confidence that they are worthy of them. And because they carry that energy, others begin to believe it too. Self-worth radiates. It sends a signal. It tells life itself what you are willing to accept and what you are not. If you doubt your worth, you will always lower your goals until they fit your doubts. But if you affirm your worth, if you nurture it daily, your goals will expand to match it. This is why affirmations, self-reflection, and healing past wounds are so vital. They are not just nice practices. They are acts of rebuilding the foundation of your self-worth. And once that foundation is strong, you naturally begin to expect more, demand more, and rise to meet more. So pause and look within. Ask yourself honestly, do I truly believe I am worthy of the goals I set? Or are they just dreams I repeat without conviction? The difference between those who rise and those who remain stuck is not always talent or opportunity. It is belief. The moment you begin to value yourself, you stop settling. You stop chasing what is beneath you. You begin to attract what matches your new standard. And from that moment, your life starts to reflect not just the goals you set, but the worth you finally claimed. Standards sound noble when spoken out loud, but without accountability, they dissolve into little more than wishful thinking. You can talk about discipline. You can imagine the person you want to become. You can set intentions every new year or every Monday morning, but if no one holds you to them, if you do not hold yourself to them, they will fade like smoke in the air. Accountability is the bridge between intention and transformation. It is the difference between the person who dreams of change and the person who lives it. When no one is watching, that is when the true test begins. It is easy to talk about discipline in front of others, easy to post your goals, easy to appear committed. But the real measure of your standards is found in the silence of your private hours. Do you still rise when the alarm goes off at dawn, even when no one will notice if you hit snooze? Do you still put in the work, even when there is no applause waiting at the end of the day? The answers to those questions reveal your true level of accountability. Consider the story of Benjamin Franklin. He was not only a thinker and an inventor, but a man who understood the necessity of tracking himself with brutal honesty. He created a chart to track 13 virtues, reviewing himself each night. For every virtue he failed to keep, he would mark it, confronting his own shortcomings without excuse. It was not a punishment, it was a mirror. That simple act of accountability forced him to face the gap between who he said he wanted to be and who he really was. And that constant reflection pushed him to live by higher standards than most men of his time. His greatness was not accidental, it was accountable. Today, you may not create the exact chart Franklin did, but the principle is the same. You can use a journal to track your commitments, writing down each day where you succeeded and where you fell short. You can seek out a mentor or a coach, someone who refuses to let you slip quietly back into old patterns. You can choose a friend who shares your hunger for growth and agree to hold each other to the fire. Even technology today can serve as accountability. Apps that remind you of your habits, platforms where you document your progress. The tool itself does not matter. What matters is that you place your life under a system that does not allow you to hide from yourself. When you know someone is watching, or even more powerfully, when you have trained yourself to watch with honesty, you begin to rise above your comfort zone. Accountability creates pressure, but not all pressure is bad. Diamonds are only created when pressure is applied. In the same way, accountability shapes your raw intentions into something solid, something unbreakable. But accountability requires courage, because it strips away the excuses you've been leaning on. It removes the hiding places. It forces you to see yourself clearly, not as the person you pretend to be, but as the person you are. And in that honesty, growth is born. Many people avoid accountability because they fear the discomfort of admitting failure. But failure admitted is already half conquered, while failure ignored grows silently stronger. So ask yourself, how do I hold myself accountable? Who do I allow to speak into my life? Where do I record the truth of my progress? If you cannot answer those questions, your standards are fragile. But the moment you step into accountability, you transform fragile intention into firm commitment. You begin to live not just by words, but by proof. Hold yourself accountable relentlessly, not harshly, not with self-hatred, but with the firm love of someone who knows they were made for more. Because accountability is not a prison, it is freedom. It frees you from the cycle of repeating the same empty promises, and it gives you the power to finally live by the standards you've declared. And when you master accountability, you no longer need to wait for inspiration. You have built a system that carries you forward, day after day, until the person you dreamed of becoming is no longer a dream, but your reality. Raising your standards is not a one-time decision. It is a way of life. Stop negotiating with excuses. Surround yourself with greatness. Decide what you will no longer tolerate. Build unbreakable habits. Raise your self-worth. Hold yourself accountable. Do this, and your life will no longer be defined by chance or circumstance, but by choice. Because the day you raise your standards is the day you rewrite your destiny.